Welcome to part 2 of chapter 5 of my Catholic, non-woke superhero novel, Task. Let's get to it. Platters and trays began to be passed and emptied. Mom and Nisha had made a feast. Besides green beans and rolls, there were mashed potatoes glistening with butter, roast beef exquisitely carved, a succulent pork loin, halved and roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, freshly baked cornbread, an enormous bowl of spring salad, and dark, aromatic gravy. Kosher salt, Irish butter, and American spuds, Uncle Frank said. Was there ever a better combination? I hear you, Father Callahan, Jose said, but this roast beef and gravy is too good. The real hero is the pork, Mark said. I could marry whoever made the marinade. You already did, Nisha said. Well, I could marry whoever put the almonds on the green beans, Mom added. Dad winked at her as he took a roll from the tray. Anne turned to Joachim. You didn't cook anything, but I'm still glad I married you, she said. You should be. I do all the cooking at home, he said. There was a round of laughter, and Anne viciously tickled her husband. You're not supposed to tell them that, she said. I'm sorry, Joachim sputtered. Jose, Mom began, who does the cooking in your family? We all pitch in, Mrs. Ward, Jose said, though my mom still does the majority of it. Dad has to work nights a lot, so my sisters and I try to give my mom a break when we can, though I've spent more nights at HQ than at home the past year. Where's home? Dad asked. Stratford, Connecticut, Mr. Ward, Jose answered. Is that far from New Haven? Dad asked. Not really if the traffic is good. About 20 minutes on 95, Jose said. You've been to Connecticut, Mr. Ward? I've been to New Haven a few times for Knights of Columbus meetings, Dad said. Oh, that's right. Matt told me you're a knight, Jose said. My dad became Grand Knight of his council last year. Really? Dad asked. His eyes lit up. Did you join the order? As soon as I turned 18, I did, Jose said. That's great. We need young men like you. How's your dad like being GK? He likes it, but it makes him even busier than usual. I was GK of my council for several years. I sympathize, Dad said. What's your dad's line of work, Jose? Mark asked. He owns a few ice cream parlors, Jose said. Really? Faustina asked. Yeah, Jose said. Though we specialize in paletas, so it is not exactly traditional ice cream. What's the difference? Faustina asked. Paletas are like gourmet popsicles, but with all fresh ingredients, and the different combinations of flavors can be really subtle or like super wild, and my dad and I are obsessed with perfecting each recipe. We would spend hours experimenting at home, and Mom would get so upset about the mess. Jose was beaming at Faustina, who was fascinated. Can you bring some for us to try the next time you come over? Faustina asked. The table suddenly became very quiet. Yeah, absolutely. What do you want to try? Jose asked. Surprise me, Faustina said. But only bring one flavor at a time. That way you'll have to visit a lot for us to try them all. In that case, I'm going to tell my dad it should be gonna. It should be gonna. Let's change that to gonna. That's double going to is weird. In that case, I'm going to tell my dad we're going to have to keep coming up with new flavors forever. Faustina's cheeks gained a little color, and Jose grinned from ear to ear. There was a lull in the conversation. Before Uncle Frank could strike, Matthew gave John his chance. Jose, you're a pretty big Tolkien fan, right? Matthew asked. You know it, hermano, Jose said. Johnny is too, Matthew said. John put down his fork. Your words are but shadows of the truth, for I am mighty in the lore of Middle-earth, John said ominously. Here we go, Mark complained. If you are truly wise, as my brother says, John continued, you would not balk at a challenge, Jose of Stratford. Like a trivia challenge? Jose asked. Indeed, though trivial it is not, John said. I shall put forth 3 questions, each more difficult than the last. If you answer with wisdom, I shall deem you a lore master like unto myself. How are you, my brother? Mark asked. Don't be an orc, Mark, Anne scolded him. Mark sighed aggressively and put another piece of pork on his plate. Do you accept the terms, good sir? John asked Jose. I accept, Jose said. Then we begin, John declared. The first question. What is Gandalf's true name? Olorin, Jose said. Well done, John responded. But it was a mere trifle. Indeed, but a small thing, Jose said. Not you too, Mark interjected. I deny it not, Jose said, mimicking John's voice. Your brother's challenge rings like horns calling men to war. I can do naught but meet him upon the field. Did you not know this meeting was more than mere chance, dear brother? Faustina added with an overly serious tone. The trees have whispered of this day, Luke intoned. Did you not hear? I'm going to get a chainsaw, Mark said. He pushed his chair away from the table and stood up. Just kidding. I actually want to hear this, he said as he sat back down. Aw, Mark, that is so precious, Matthew said. And I've changed my mind, Mark said. The second question, John exclaimed. Under which ruler of Numenor did the peace of the island begin to be disturbed? Your question is cunning, Jose said. It reveals the depth of your wisdom. Have you an answer? John asked. I do, Jose said, but I gotta drop the act to say it. I think it happened during the relationship between Aldarion and Arendis. Discord in the home leads to discord in the kingdom, you know what I mean? That story is like a manual for how not to treat your spouse. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. I never thought of that before, John said. I think you might be onto something. So that's a good answer? Oh, yeah, great answer, man. Thanks. Now, the third question, John said, back in character. The wise have long desired to know the truth of it, and yet the answer has long eluded them. Are you prepared, Jose? Fire away. Who is Tom Bombadil? John asked. Oh, wow. You really went for the throat with that one, Jose said. John smiled. Is the answer beyond your ken? He asked. What I want to say is that Tom Bombadil is Tom Bombadil and leave it at that, but I don't think you'd accept that. Indeed, I would not, John said. Jose thought for a moment, and then looked at Faustina and smiled. She tilted her head quizzically. Tom Bombadil is the incarnation of the concept of eucatastrophe, Jose answered. John's mouth went slightly agape. He slowly turned to Faustina. He passed the test, he said. I'll diminish and go west and remain Johnny. You kids are so weird, Mark shouted. Come on, Mark, Matthew said. You know you're a big fan, too. Mark leaned back in his chair and hurled his spoon at Matthew. The Nullfield caught it, and Matthew handed it back to him. Kazadai Menu, Mark said nonchalantly. Mark, apologize to your brother, Mom demanded. It's Faustina's birthday, and we have company. Sorry, Mark said. It's okay, it was pretty funny, Matthew said. The other siblings were smiling and biting their tongues. Jose, I'm so sorry for that, Mom said. Mrs. Ward, you've welcomed me into your beautiful home and given me a fantastic meal. No apology is necessary, Jose replied. Mom seemed very pleased with his response. Jose, I am wondering something about your family. Would you indulge my curiosity? Uncle Frank asked. Of course, Father Callahan, Jose said. Growing up, did your family celebrate Day of the Dead, Halloween, or both? Dias de los Muertos was always a bigger deal for us, Jose started, but we definitely celebrated Halloween, too. I used my power to get a lot of candy. And what power is that? Uncle Frank asked. I can make copies of myself and coordinate their actions with my own very effectively, Jose said. There will be a demonstration later during the show. Faustina leaned forward. I'm even more excited now, she said. I can see how that power could be very useful on Halloween, Uncle Frank said. Would your costume be copied too? Everything I am wearing and holding, though nothing living, and the more complicated something I have is, the shorter time my copies and their stuff last, Jose said. Actually, Matt, speaking of costumes, I don't think I ever told you this, but do you remember like 10 years ago when you tried out having a costume? We do not speak of that year, Jose, Matthew said. Oh, well, all I wanted to say was I dressed up as you for Halloween that year. I did too, Faustina said. I thought Matthew looked so cool in that big purple onesie. He kinda did though, Jose said, and the yellow trim was on point. Right, Faustina said, and he had a big yellow G for gravity on his chest. The yellow G, Jose said. I forgot about that. And I'm still trying to forget about it, Matthew said. He was red-faced. I have a photo album, Mark said. One of my most prized possessions. Nisha shook her head and mouthed, no. Now that you've asked me some questions, Jose began, is it all right if I ask you a few? I'd love to hear your questions, Faustina said sweetly. The rest of the table murmured in agreement. So what are everyone's code names? Jose asked. I asked Matt, but he said he wouldn't tell. I'm sorry, Jose, Mom started, but we don't use code names in this house. My children have real names, and that is what we call them by. I apologize, Mrs. Ward, Jose said, very obviously embarrassed. Faustina shot her mother a look that could freeze lava, and Matthew felt the temperature drop a few degrees. Of course, Dad interjected, learning what the children's code names are is not the same as calling them by their code names, right, honey? No, I suppose not, Mom said after a moment. I'm sorry, Jose. I get very protective of my babies. I understand, Mrs. Ward, he said. My mom tells my sisters not to call me Split for the same reason. I think I would like your mother, Mom said. I think so too, Mrs. Ward, Jose said. You already know my code name, Jose, Matthew said. So why don't we go down the list in age order and have spouses say their code names after their Ward sibling goes. Also, I've already told him your powers, so just the code name is fine. My code name is Slug, Mark said. Like a bullet? Jose asked. Or a punch, Mark added. Good on you for not mentioning the bug. That would have annoyed me. That's a pretty cool one, Jose said. My code name isn't as cool as Mark's, Nisha said. It's Soothe. Oh, that makes sense with your power, Jose said. It's fine, I guess, Nisha said. How about you, Luke? Jose asked. Luke sighed and shook his head. My code name is pretty lame, he said. It's Heart. Like that old cartoon show with the kids in the rings? Jose asked. Luke nodded. I'm sorry, Jose said. Well, my code name is even worse, Anne said. I must have really annoyed the panel during my power screening. You annoyed a lot of people when you were younger, Anne, Mark said. Everyone annoys you, Mark, she said. No, Anne, he's right, Matthew said. You were a pain for a while. Every single joke or exaggeration you would say, lie. It was irksome. Wasn't that around the same time you were wearing the costume, Matthew? Anne asked. Okay, just tell him your code name and let's move on, Matthew said. Rude, Anne said to Jose. I'm sorry, what did I do? All the siblings except Faustina chuckled. Anne's code name is Rude, Faustina said. Oh, Jose said. That's pretty funny. My code name is Plus, Joachim said, because of the math power. That adds up, Jose said. That's the 53rd time I've heard a variation of that joke while sitting at this table, Joachim replied. Oh, said Jose. And it won't be the last. You can count on it, Matthew said. Mary, your code name? Mine is Source, Mary said. That's actually really cool, Jose said. I think you've got the best one so far. Mary smiled at the comment. I'm definitely the coolest Ward sibling, she said. Uh-oh, Spicy Mary is coming out, Faustina said. The other Ward siblings nodded and laughed. Jose gave Faustina a bemused look. Mary is usually very quiet and sweet, Faustina said, but sometimes she comes out with these comments that you just can't believe are from her. My youngest sister is just like that, Jose said. She's also 12, so she is clearly wise beyond her years, Mary said. Of course, Jose agreed. I'm next, John said. My code name is Seek. That's also pretty cool, Jose said, but still not as cool as Source. I'll accept that, John said. Of course, I have the coolest code name by default, Faustina boasted. She pretended to toss her hair back. Ice powers will do that for you. So what is it? Jose asked. Frostbite. You got a 2-syllable code name? Jose asked. Yep, I was the first one, Faustina said. I'm only like 14 months older than you, he said. I was so close. If you're envious, we can talk about it, Faustina said. I can help you process those feelings, and in time, you'll accept that my code name is cooler than yours. How soon can I make an appointment? Jose asked. Anytime, Faustina answered. Okay, enough flirting, Mark said. Jose and Faustina quickly broke eye contact. I got another question for you, Jose. Who here has the best power? That's definitely the hardest question anyone's asked me so far, Jose said. He's telling the truth, Anne commented. Too bad, Mark said. You gotta answer, and Anne will tell us if you're lying. It's okay, Jose. You can just say mine, Faustina said. Only if he wants to walk back to HQ, Matthew said. We all know which person at this table has the best power. Jose looked around the table at everyone, and his gaze came to rest on Uncle Frank. Actually, we do, Jose said. Father Callahan has the best power. He can bring Jesus to us. There was a brief moment of silence where everyone looked at Anne. She just shrugged. Well played, Mark said. I have to agree with Mark, Matthew added. Faustina nodded her agreement. Jose, Uncle Frank said, you are of course correct, and may I ask, have you considered the priesthood? Okay, dinner's over, Faustina immediately decreed. Time for Jose to give me part 2 of his present. It's not too late, Uncle Frank said. Uncle Frank, don't you have to hear confessions or give a retreat or something? Faustina asked. Think of the service you could do for the church, the priest continued. Faustina marched around the table and took José's hand in hers. His face flushed. I just remembered. I didn't finish giving you the tour. Let's go, Faustina said. I thought we saw everything already. What's left? José said as Faustina pulled him out of his seat. The garage, Faustina said. The garage it is, José said. Anne, Joachim, you're on, Matthew said. Oh, right, Anne said. She and Joachim jumped up and followed Faustina and José to the garage. Another vocation lost, Uncle Frank lamented. A different vocation found, Dad said. I was skeptical, but I think I agree with you now, Mom said. They both seem smitten, and I get the feeling José's family is a lot like ours. José and Faustina do seem comfortable with each other. Maybe too comfortable, Dad said. Don't worry, Dad. I told José I would throw him into the sun if he hurts her, Matthew said. On that happy note, Mom said, let's clean up. Everyone had finished eating by now, and there were not many leftovers. With everyone helping, the table was cleared within minutes, and the remaining food was packed away shortly thereafter. Matthew's father carefully arranged things in the dishwasher to somehow accommodate almost everything that had been used. Only the trays and the salad bowl had to be washed by hand. By the time cleanup was finished, Faustina had led José into the living room and was chatting away with him, with Anne and Joachim listening attentively. That's really where the company's name came from, I promise, Faustina said as Matthew and the rest of the family entered the room. That's so crazy, José said. I love that you turned a joke into a business. You talking about the van? Matthew asked. Yeah, Faustina said. When I showed José to the garage, he was like, Does your company do chauffeur service? And I told him the whole story. Faustina, my voice is a lot smoother than that, José said. You made it seem so rough. I wasn't going for rough so much as manly, she said. I must be very manly, José said. Faustina blushed and pressed her lips together as she smiled. All right, Mr. Manly, she said. How about you do your show? José stood up. I am a little nervous performing for a professional, he said, gesturing to Faustina, but I think you will like it. He strode to the center of the room. The bouquet he had brought was in a vase on the mantel behind him. A happy birthday sign hung from the mantel below it. Matt told me you enjoy classic Broadway shows. I love them, Faustina said. Her eyes went wide. Are you going to sing for me? I am, José said. Yay! Faustina squealed. But first, I have to introduce you to my friends. José closed his eyes and concentrated for a few moments, and then suddenly there were 3 of him. Oh, wow, your power is awesome, Faustina said. They just pop into existence. Please allow me to introduce my dear friends, José Dos and José Tres. Hola, amigos, José Dos said with a broad smile. Saludos cordiales a todos, José Tres offered magnanimously. They only speak Spanish, José said. Are they you? Matthew's mother asked. Kind of, José said, but also not. They don't really do much without my mental direction, and I can sort of sense things through them, but it's not like I can feel what they feel or anything. Where do they go when you're done with them? Mark asked. José shrugged. No clue, he said. Do they know they're going to cease existing soon? Luke asked. I don't think so, José responded. They might have memories, or they might get some of my memories, but they're more like José-shaped robots than people. How long will they be here, I guess? John asked. These 2 could last for hours if I wanted them to, José answered. If I had made more copies, then a lot less time. Or in combat, maybe only a few seconds at a time when I make them really quickly. Only need a few seconds in a fight, Mark said. That's a really useful power in a pinch. Okay, stop analyzing José's power and let him sing for me, Faustina said. Only because it's your birthday, Mark said. The José trio breathed in together and then vocalized a lovely introductory phrase. Matthew could not identify the song, but it felt familiar. Then José started to sing the lyrics, and Matthew instantly recognized On the Street Where You Live, one of Faustina's favorites. He looked at her and saw her smile grow wider. José was doing a fine job with the first verse, and when he transitioned to the second verse, his copy's vocal accompaniment grew more complex. Each note was in pitch, and the chords were pleasant enough, but Matthew could tell José was building towards something and was not yet there. Faustina was swaying and would not take her eyes off José. Then José came to the bridge and really opened up. He switched from English to Spanish, and his copy started to sing the words with him. The feeling in the room changed. People had been listening politely to a pleasant performance, but now they were drawn into the music. Matthew glanced at Faustina and saw she had stopped swaying. She sat with her hands pressed down on her lap, and her eyes were shining. José's personality and confidence surged through his voice, and instead of singing to the room like he had done before, he was focused entirely on Faustina. Matthew saw her unconsciously leaning forward as José gestured towards her at the end of the bridge. Then he switched back to English, but his copies sang their harmonies softly in Spanish, never muddying the lyrics, but instead rhythmically blending with them. The two languages did not compete against, but complemented one another. As José neared the finale, he put power into his voice and soared through the last high note and the descending phrase immediately following it. Then he dropped the volume, but not the intensity, and finished sweetly, all the while singing directly to Faustina. She was spellbound. When José finished the song, he dismissed his copies, and they vanished. Everyone but Faustina clapped and cheered. She rose to her feet, went to José, and hugged him tightly. She rested her face against his shoulder. José was shocked and delighted simultaneously, and he returned the embrace, albeit gently. "That was so beautiful. Thank you," Faustina murmured to him. "I'm really glad you think so. Happy birthday," José said in reply. After less than 2 seconds, Matthew's father cleared his throat so forcefully it made José jump. Faustina got the hint and released him, but held his hands. "Am I going to have to wait for my next birthday to hear you sing again?" she asked. "Not if I can help it," José responded. "Good," Faustina said. And that is where we will end part 2 of chapter 5. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, or follow, and please, please, please share and leave a comment. Your comments can help me make the narrative stronger. Please go ahead and say whatever you want, positive, negative, anything in between, both. I'm very appreciative of whatever comment you leave. Thank you very much again, and God bless you.
Ooh, ancient province.